Thanks for tuning in to VSB After the Bell. I'm your host, Gianna Chow. VSB, otherwise known as the Vancouver School Board, is located on the unceded traditional lands of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. The district is among the most diverse school systems in Canada, with an annual enrollment of just under 50,000 students, from kindergarten to grade 12 and adult education students. November 1st was the start of priority kindergarten registration for the VSB. This year, any child born in 2018 is eligible to start. Starting kindergarten is a huge milestone for both families and their children. There's a lot of emotions and, to be honest, paperwork to go through, and we know there are lots of questions along the way. We've seen the comments online and heard about the parent group chats. We know kindergarten enrollment is a hot topic here in Vancouver. So for this month's podcast and Matter of the Month, we're doing a deep dive into kindergarten registration and enrollment. We'll look at what you need to know, how to prepare your child for school, and answer questions submitted by families through our social media channels. David Nelson, Deputy Superintendent, and Michael Rossi, Acting Director of Instruction, joins us today on the podcast to talk about all things kindergarten. David and Michael were both previously teachers and held administrator positions in the district. They are now part of the district's leadership team who work behind the scenes and play an integral part in the kindergarten registration and enrollment process. Thanks for joining us today, David and Michael.
Thanks for having us,
Yeah,
Gianna.
pleasure to be here.
First off, can you walk us through the kindergarten registration process? When should you start, and what's the difference between regular registration, priority registration, choice program registration, and cross-boundary registration?
Yeah, so I think first and foremost, it's important to understand that there's two ways to register depending on where you were born as a child. And so if the child was born inside of Canada, they register at their catchment school. And so how you register at your catchment school is it's a two-step process. And so this two-step process starts with an online application, and then it follows up with a visit to the school where they would take verifying documentation to the school and submit it to the office there. If you're born outside of Canada, you go to our Newcomers Welcome Center, where they welcome you through an online application again to start, and then you would take all of your documentation that they require to the Newcomers Welcome Center, and they verify your documentation there.
So that means even if you are a permanent resident or a Canadian citizen, but as long as you're born outside of Canada, you go to the Newcomer Welcome Center.
Yeah, that's correct. So I think most importantly, it's where your child was born. And so if your child was born outside of Canada, you would go to the Newcomers Welcome Center.
Okay, and what about priority registration and choice program and cross-boundary? You know, there's a lot of different types of registration, and kind of to wrap your head around that. Yeah,
so priority registration is basically from November 1st each year until January 31st. And so priority registration is a time period just so that we don't have lineups of people coming into our schools on November 1st. So anyone that applies between November 1st and January 31st is considered to be a priority registrant. And so it's really important to understand that priority registration, you have to have your package completed by January 31st. So referring back to what I said earlier in the sense of the two-step process, you would have to have your online application submitted along with the verification of your documents at the school level completed by the end of January.
And is that first come, first serve, or can you go anytime between November to January and you'll be within the priority timeline?
It's anytime between November and the end of January.
Okay, that's good. And then can you walk us a little bit through choice programs? What type of programs are offered, and how does that come into play with priority registration? When are you supposed to apply for choice programs?
Yeah, so first and foremost, you have to, every family must apply at their catchment school first. So your catchment school is basically where you live. And so once you've applied to your catchment school, then you have the opportunity, if you wish to do so, to apply to a choice program or a district program. And so district program timelines are from January 9th to February 3rd this year. And so it's important, like I said before, to register at your catchment school first to apply if you want to apply to your choice program, because you must have what we call a PEN number to apply to the choice program, which is something that your catchment school will be giving you once registered. So the types of choice programs that we offer as a district are French immersion, Mandarin bilingual, fine arts, Indigenous focus, and Montessori programs.
And what's, I guess, so special about each one, or what's the difference that people want to apply to these programs?
These are just programs that some families choose to apply to if they wish to do so. Many families just choose to apply to their catchment school, and that's perfectly fine.
And so you have to apply to your catchment school first in order to apply to a choice program, and anyone living in the Vancouver district can apply to a choice program.
Correct.
Okay. And for the catchment school, how am I supposed to know which catchment I belong to? Where can I find that information?
So that's actually the first step of our online application form. So when you go into the online application form, one of the very first steps is you have to put in your address. And when you put in your address of your primary residence, then you click a button. It will tell you the catchment school that you are currently living in.
Okay, and so I applied to my catchment school. I try to apply to a choice program, but maybe I don't want to go to the catchment school that I'm in. Maybe I want to drop my kid off on the way to work, and it's at a different catchment school. Can I apply to a different school that's not in my catchment area?
Yes, you definitely can if you would like to. That's a completely different process. Again, you must register at your catchment school or apply at your catchment school first. But the month of February, basically February 1st until February 28th, the cross-boundary window opens. Cross-boundary is what you're basically describing before, which is when you want to apply to a school outside of your catchment. And so you can apply through that cross-boundary window from February 1st to February 28th if you wish to do so.
And when will parents know if they've been enrolled in their catchment school or choice program or cross-boundary?
So choice programs usually come out, you get notified mid-February. For all other kindergarten registrations at their catchment school, we usually find out sort of mid-April.
So I know some parents also hear earlier too, like when they make the announcement about choice programs. Why is that the case that some parents hear if they're enrolled in a school earlier than others?
So we do have some unique circumstances where we do have identified full schools. And so those identified full schools do hear at the exact same time as our district programs, which is mid-February. And so then our choice programs, our district programs, and our full schools do here in mid-February, but the majority of our schools here in mid-April.
That does bring up a good question about waitlist numbers. Do they start at 1 if you're on the waitlist, or is it that everyone that is in a full school will get a number, and so the waitlist might be 52, but the school is accepting 40 students?
Well, I can start with that. So we would, if a school had, let's just use a number again, and I'm going to make up a school. So school A is able to take 2 kindergarten classes of students, and there were 40 applicants for kindergarten, and there were 50 families who applied. That would mean that the school would be able to accommodate 40 students, and if there were more applicants than spaces, we would do a draw at that point in time, because the whole point of having a priority registration window is that we don't want families lining up. It's not a first come, first serve situation. So if there are more applicants than spaces, the school would accommodate based on a randomized draw students into the school. and then the remaining students would be placed on a wait list also by that randomized draw. So, it does get a little bit complex, of course, because, in our catchment schools, we also prioritize siblings. So those students would be accommodated first, and then non-sibling applicants would be accommodated second in a randomized draw. And as students apply later, because we acknowledge that families do move in and they apply after the priority registration window, if there is no space in that school, then they are added to the wait list as in the order that they come into the school. So it sounds like it would be a simple process, but of course there are people that come in at different times, and the wait list numbers are always changing. Families are moving, families are taking placements, but new families are applying. So wait list numbers are not static. And often people want us to say, what's the wait list number? Well, the wait list number can change dramatically within the course of even a single day. So updating those lists or publishing a list actually would probably create more frustration than it would solve, because as soon as the numbers were published, there'd be a good chance they're no longer accurate.
Which programs would you recommend for an advanced learner? Which program would you recommend for a learner with special needs? This is the type of questions that we often hear from parents or caregivers.
Yeah, so maybe I'll take that one, Gianna. I think it's a really good question. And we certainly acknowledge that families that have a child entering school for the first time have lots of questions about what the school offers and how the school is going to address the unique needs of their child. So I really, as part of the registration process that Michael spoke about, he talked about, once the online application to your catchment school is complete, there's a step in which you visit the school to take in verifying documents. It's a really good opportunity to ask at that point in time for an opportunity to schedule a time to speak with the school principal, to talk about if you have your specific child and any questions you may have about your child's specific learning needs. It's something that we, as a district, take a great deal of pride in, and that is that we work with all students, and we want to see that all of our students who enter our school are successful. I would encourage parents that have those kinds of questions to reach out specifically to their school principal through that registration process to have a conversation.
So we really do encourage parents and families to go and get to know their schools and their administrators. I also know that kindergarten is a big milestone, and many families want to ensure a successful transition to school life. Do you have any tips in getting children ready for kindergarten?
I think that there's a few things that families can do and are really important in terms of helping prepare a child to start kindergarten. First and foremost, I would say just start some conversations with your child. Talk about school. Talk about what's going to happen. Talk about what the child will be doing. Help them be excited about the opportunity to start school. Also, find opportunities to visit the outside and area of the school. If you're close, walk to the school, play on the playground, get familiar with the route and with the routine. It's also really good if your child is not in a routine of getting up in the morning to start in advance of school with getting up and having breakfast and getting ready. So there's all sorts of things that I think parents can do just to really set the stage for a really good entry into school. School communities will also then reach out to families prior to school starting to provide some information around things like what students can bring to school in terms of materials. It is important to note that we don't ask families in Vancouver to buy school supplies. That's something that we do for all students, and families are charged a small fee at the beginning of the school year for those supplies. Schools will also have opportunities through our Welcome to Kindergarten programming for families to come in advance of the school year to meet the staff, to explore the school, and to learn more about the opportunities at the school. And also, we recognize that starting school is a time where we want to really get to know the child, and we really want to get to know the family. So all of our school programs start with a gradual entry. So kindergarten students don't come to school for the full day at the start. They will come to school in smaller groups for smaller chunks of time over the first few days of the school year, so that they have time for more one-on-one attention from the teacher. And so there's more opportunities for the teacher to actually have conversations with the parents about the specific needs of each child in order to help set the year up in a way that it'll be successful.
Okay, that's really helpful to know. And even going through the Welcome to Kindergarten process myself with my 5-year-old, I found it helpful to know that, the first week of school, every school is different, but for my child's school, my kid went to school for 1 hour and then 3 hours and then kind of the full day. And it was first with half the class and then a little bit more. So it's really a gradual entry. And, because school is such a huge change for so many kids, we want to make sure that these kids are transitioning smoothly into their new school life. Through the years, as the population in Vancouver changes, so has the student population in our schools. Although VSB has seen an enrollment decline of about 8.4% over the last 10 years, and most schools are able to enroll their catchment students through the registration process, there are a few schools that can accommodate all catchment students. Now, we've seen the news and we heard about the frustration and anxiety from parents trying to get their kids into some catchment schools. Can you explain why this happens every year, and why can't we just expand our schools to accommodate all kids?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think part of the answer is in your question actually, that stated most of our schools can accommodate their catchment students. We do have a few schools in Vancouver. There are 13 schools identified last year that were identified as full schools. And for the context of this full school conversation, full schools are defined as schools that cannot accommodate more students because they do not have the physical space to do so. In those schools, we've looked at all the spaces that can accommodate students, and they have been converted into spaces already. And so currently, in our context in Vancouver, we have class size maxes in kindergarten of 20 students. So we cannot go over 20 students in a kindergarten class. We also do not combine kindergartens and grade ones in the same class. I think it's also important to understand that even if you're waitlisted at a school, at one of our full schools, you are offered a space at a Vancouver school. And so those waitlists are continued to be maintained at the school level until you are offered a space at your catchment school if you're waitlisted. But it is, like I said before, important to understand that you will be offered a space, and that's part of the district's job to identify a space and offer you a space for kindergarten in a Vancouver school.
Right, and we try to offer them to a school that's closest to their catchment school. And, we talked about choice programs and cross-boundary, and the waitlist changes constantly because if someone got into their catchment school, but then they decided to to a choice program, they got into a choice program and they decided to go to that choice program, then they get pulled out of their waitlist at the catchment school. The next person on the waitlist for the catchment school is up, and same with cross-boundary. So is that why the waitlist is so fluid and moves all the time?
Yeah, waitlists definitely move consistently, especially right at the beginning when, as you mentioned, when choice programs are being offered, when cross-boundary gets offered, students move. There's a variety of different reasons that our waitlists move throughout the year.
Right, and the advice is kind of to really wait until mid-April when we tell everyone if they're confirmed at their school or not to decide what to do afterwards.
Yep.
Okay. And then what about, we know there are areas of high density areas such as Olympic Village, North Canby Corridor, downtown. Like, how are we addressing the enrollment and the space issues in those schools?
Yeah, so we do have a small pocket or a couple small pockets in Vancouver that are increasing enrollment, or we have enrollment demand. Like you mentioned, downtown is one of the areas. The North Cambie area is the other area that is highly identified. So in the downtown area, we do have a school being built in the Cole Harbour area that should be open in the next few years, which will help with our enrollment in the downtown core. We've also identified a new school to be built on the Roberts Annex site in the future, which will also help with our enrollment downtown. In the North Cambie area, we've identified in our capital plan as a district a need for a school in Olympic Village, and we continue to pursue the funding for a school in Olympic Village.
And so who funds that school? Is it the district? Is it a business? Who provides the funding to build a school?
So as mentioned before, we do have a capital plan as a district, and a capital plan is something that we have to submit to the Ministry of Education on a yearly basis. And through that capital plan, we have to create a business argument to basically state that we need some funding to build that school. And so we do rely on Ministry of Education funding to build new schools or expansions of our facilities. And as a district, we do identify those schools through our capital plan.
Okay, and what you're saying here is that the ministry is really the primary funder to build schools, and a capital plan is something that we use. It's a business case that we use to submit to the ministry.
Yeah, so I just also wanted to add that districts also can be asked to contribute up to 50% of the cost of a new school. So the submission for approval to proceed with construction of a new school does go to the ministry. And as Michael's noted, the ministry is largely responsible for funding, but they can ask districts to contribute funds towards new school construction.
And have we? I mean, like Cole Harbour, for instance. Did we contribute funding for that? How did that work?
So Cole Harbour was pretty unique. Cole Harbour was funded through proceeds of the sale of a underground parcel of land located at the site of Lord Roberts Annex.
Okay. And that was a deal with BC Hydro, right? If I remember correctly.
The district entered into an underground sale, so not for the land on ground, underground parcel of land to BC Hydro. And in exchange for that, the district received funding, and that funding, or a portion of that funding, is being used to construct a new school at Cole Harbour.
So it kind of all depends on where the school's land is, and if we own the land, if we lease the land, if we have to ask the ministry for funding, and that's why each school, depending on the circumstance of that land, is if we can expand, if we have the funding to expand or build a new school.
Yeah, absolutely. We need to work with the ministry through our annual capital plan submission, which is where the district lays out its priorities and requests approval for those priorities, as well as funding for those priorities. If I could also go back a little bit to the notion of full schools, and just really wanted to stress to families that if a school is full and is not able to accommodate a student who lives in the catchment, the district does make sure that we find a placement for every single child in a school as close as we possibly can to their catchment school. So I think earlier, Jana, you asked about families waiting to find out if they got in, to decide if they had to go out and find a school. And no family needs to go out and find a school. If we're not able to place a child at their catchment school, we will find a placement for every single child who applies to their catchment school.
Okay. Yeah. And I think from the parents' perspective is just knowing where their child is going will help with family planning, especially with young children. And then if you're working, there's a lot of coordination that happens. So it's nice to know in advance as much as possible. But I also understand from the district's perspective, there's a lot that's happening. And mid-April is kind of the earliest that we can tell families when if they're getting into their catchment school or not. So thanks for this information, guys. It's helpful to provide some clarity as to why the registration process takes time and seems so complex. There really are many different factors the district has to consider. I know there are still many unanswered questions. That's why over the past weeks, we've asked our 5,000 plus followers on Instagram and Facebook to submit questions, and here's what they have asked. At Vancouver Kids, this person asks, is there a list of all Vancouver schools that have a lot of space? What's special about them? For instance, if they have French or arts programs, and what are the odds of getting into a school? Like, how many applicants do you receive every year? How many available spaces do you have for kindergarten? This is also a similar question at Lorelli88. I'd like to know how many spaces available at each school, as well as their unique characteristics. Parents want to know what to expect so they can secure other resources if needed, such as language, education, music, or choir.
Yeah, so a couple great questions there. And I think to address both of them, is there a list of schools that have space at them? We definitely have a list of schools that are identified as full, and that list is a public list. As for the number of applicants that we get as a district, we get about approximately every year about 3,600 applicants for kindergarten every year. And we find placements for every applicant that comes through the doors to a Vancouver school. And so I think that answers both the questions in the sense of the number of applicants and where we have space.
And I think what I would add to the question around, what to expect at your child's school, again, as noted earlier, really strongly encourage parents when they're registering at their catchment school, if they have questions about the school, about the kinds of programs and opportunities available at that school, that they schedule or request a time to schedule an opportunity to talk to the school principal. Because again, although all of our schools offer a great program for students, all of our schools also are somewhat unique and have different types of opportunities that they can offer to students and families as part of those school communities.
And how you get in contact with the school community is you can find their information on the website. Each school has their own website and contact information. You can call them, or you can just simply walk into the school and make an appointment with the office admin assistant to see the principal or vice principal. At Higgy Boots asks, if I have a sibling at a school, do I still have to apply at a catchment school first, or do I wait until February 1st to apply cross-boundary?
Yeah, another great question. And so the first thing you need to do when registering a child for kindergarten is apply at your catchment school. So if you are applying at your catchment school and your sibling goes to that catchment school, you would get sibling priority at that catchment school. But if the sibling goes to an out of catchment or a cross-boundary school, like I said before, you must apply at your catchment school first, and then you can apply during the month of February, February 1st to February 28th, which is our cross-boundary window, which you would apply. And on that application, you would identify that you do have a sibling attending that school.
So rule of thumb, apply to your catchment school first. At Farah Osad asks, if I am registering my child on the Newcomer Welcome website, do I have to hear back from VSB prior to Newcomer Welcome Center contacting my catchment school area for an in-person visit? What's the timeline to hear back regarding our application? Please clarify the process of Newcomer Welcome Center registration for kindergarten.
Yeah, so our Newcomer Welcome Center obviously takes in a number of applicants every year. So the time between November 1st and January 31st is one of their busiest times. And sometimes that does create a little bit of a delay between when you apply and when your catchment school does hear about your application. Like mentioned before, it is not a first come, first serve basis. So it's okay that we have that delay. But we do have a similar timeline in the sense that I mentioned before. So all our schools do communicate by mid-April about sort of the status of your application at your catchment school. And so once the school has communicated with you, I think that's an opportunity to reach out to the school and ask any questions or comments that you might have for them.
So it doesn't matter if you submit your application to the Newcomer Welcome Center or through the regular application process. Everyone should hear back around mid-April. WC BioGreen asks, is there a confirmation once registration is done, we have done the application and went to the school with documentation?
Yeah, so again, like mentioned before, the registration is a two-step process. So as you mentioned in your question, you've completed your application online is your first step, and then you go to the school and verify your documentation is your second step. Once you've done that, if the school required additional documentation, they would tell you at that point that they required additional documentation. If they do not require any additional documentation from you, you can assume that your application is complete.
Okay. And this is another question on Facebook. It's from a group of parents. They're in the Elsie Roy catchment area, and one parent was notified that all 5 of their cross-boundary application was denied. She asks, what happens now? I assume the overflow school of Elsie Roy is Lord Strathcona. Did anyone apply here as cross-boundary and get declined? She's wondering what happens in this case that all her cross-boundary applications got declined, and where does her child go to school?
So thanks, Jenna. In listening to your question, I think I just wanted to re-clarify that if a family applies to their catchment school, that's all you need to do. Families have the opportunity to submit applications to choice programs if they're interested in those programs. They also can submit applications to attend other schools through the cross-boundary process. But any child, and this is in particular in relation to Elsie Roy, any child who applies to Elsie Roy and does not get in will be offered a placement by the district. So, the question was what happens if they apply to the overflow school and don't get in through a cross-boundary? Just to be clear again, there is no requirement to apply to the overflow school. The district will place you, and priority will be given after catchment students to students being placed from full schools at those overflow schools.
Okay, thank you, David. But I guess the thing is here, they didn't get into their catchment school, but they may not want to go to their overflow school because of where it's located. It's not on their way to work, whatever the reason is. So they're denied these cross-boundary registration. I guess, how can we help families in these situations?
So again, it's important to note that we do make it a priority through our registration process and through the priority registration window that we know all the students who live in a catchment and all the students who are looking to attend their catchment school. And as a district, it's our first priority to accommodate as many of those students as we can in their catchment schools. After this process, of course, if we have students who cannot be accommodated, we look to accommodate those families in schools because we acknowledge and know that it's challenging for a family to not get into the catchment school for a lot of reasons, but not the least of which is getting children to and from the school. So we look for schools that are as close as possible in accommodating any students who can't be accommodated at their catchment school. Families, of course, then have the opportunity to apply through the cross-boundary process. Schools won't necessarily know, though, through that process whether they can take a cross-boundary application until later in the year, because they need to first ensure that they're able to accommodate all of their catchment students. So certainly as a district, we can publish the list of schools where they will not be even accepting cross-boundary applications, and those would be the schools that Michael spoke about earlier as our schools that are full due to lack of actual physical space. In terms of our other cross-boundary applications, though, unfortunately, there's no way to tell parents in advance of of them submitting applications whether or not the school will have space, because really it does depend on how many encatchment students register, and then more importantly, how many of those students who registered end up taking placements in catchment or in choice programs, moving out of the district, taking other cross-boundary placements. So really, I understand it can be a frustrating process for parents, but there is no way to project in advance whether a school will be able to accommodate a cross-boundary applicant or not.
Okay, and so say I go to another school that's not in my catchment area for kindergarten, but is there still a chance for my child to go to register at their catchment school later on in grade 1, or as they get older? What are the chances of them getting into their catchment school at a later grade?
So I think that's also a really good question, because what families need to know is if you're, and I'm going to stick with Elsie Roy, if you have applied to a full school like Elsie Roy and you're unable to be accommodated, you are placed on a wait list, and that wait list does not expire until such time as your child has been offered a spot at that school. So if you apply for kindergarten and the school can take 40 students and you're number 52 on a wait list for that school, the school, as spaces become available in kindergarten, but also as children move through grades, grade 1, grade 2, will maintain that wait list and that priority order. And so what we find at schools like Elsie Roy is that as the grades progress, generally by about grade 3, wait lists have been exhausted and we have been able to accommodate families. We also find, though, I will note that in most cases, families, once they're settled in a school community, are happy with that school. Their children have made friends, their children are learning, they've made connections with other families. So we do find the reason why we're able to clear the wait lists as students progress through the grades at even our full schools is that many families choose to remain at the school where they were placed because they're happy with that placement.
Okay, that's really good to clarify. Thank you. Okay, our last question we received was through our general inbox. This person asks, I'm a first-time parent and I've never studied at a public elementary school in Canada. I'd like to register my child in a choice program like French immersion or Mandarin bilingual at Norquay Elementary, but this is not our catchment area. Can I register on January 9th? Do I have to wait until February 1st to register via cross-boundary registration?
Yeah, and so with this question, I think it's really important to identify the difference between a district choice program and cross-boundary. And so a district choice program are those programs that I mentioned before. So you have your early Mandarin bilingual, which is mentioned in this question, your French immersion programs, your Montessori programs, your Indigenous focus programs, and your fine arts programs. So those are offered at a few schools across the district, which is outlined on our choice program or district program website. And so for this specific question, if you would like to register at the Mandarin bilingual program at Norquay, because that's a district program, you would first have to register at your catchment school, because that's your first step for any application. And then you can register between January 9th and February 3rd for the district choice program, which is the Mandarin bilingual program.
Thank you, David and Michael, for walking listeners through the kindergarten registration process. You definitely helped clarify some outstanding questions from families and gave us real insight into challenges the district faces when it comes to enrollment organization.
Thanks for having us,
Yeah,
Gianna.
pleasure to be here.
Thanks for tuning in to VSB After the Bell. We release episodes monthly on the last Thursday of the month. We'll catch up with you then. VSB After the Bell, produced by the VSB Communications Department. Special thanks to music teacher Mr. Bonnell and Nightingale Elementary students for the original theme song. Keep up to date with district news. Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at VSB39 or Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube at Vancouver School Board. And don't forget to subscribe to VSB After the Bell on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts.
After the bell, after the bell, after the bell with the bee.